Hello, everybody. Welcome to Leadership Book of the Month, number 55. I am Kelly Byrnes, Voyage Consulting Group, and Brett, welcome. Good to have you back.
Thank you.
Number 55 together, pretty exciting. And
Very.
We are excited to have the author of today's book, Practical Leadership. We'll dive in pretty soon, but the author, 𝗕𝗢𝗢, is here with us. Janet, thank you so much for joining us and for writing such a great book and for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yes, and we created this 4 years ago, over 4 years ago. We created this to be a place for leaders of the future who want to invest in themselves today, is how we position it. So we bring in leadership books that are non-academic usually, but based in research, but mostly based in reality. And this book just hits it out of the park for all of those. So let me invite you, Janet, to do a little intro if you would like to, and then Brett, I'll invite you to do the same.
All righty. Well, I spent about 25 years recovering large-scale programs, and when you abstract it up to the very highest level, what you realize is that if a program is going to be successful or not, it's based on either leadership or lack of leadership. And so after taking copious notes for 25 years, I thought, maybe I could just capture some of these lessons from an in the trenches perspective and say, if we had done this instead, here are some success criteria that the leaders could have made some of these projects successful. So my perspective is very much from an in the trenches, I'm not an OD or HR person. So that's the lens that I wrote the book through, was what could we do differently and how could we teach people to be better leaders so they can actually get the results that they want.
Yeah, because it's, I like how you said it comes down to leadership. In the end, it comes down to leadership. Yeah. Brett, introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Brett 𝙘𝙧𝙖𝙘𝙀. As Kelly said, happy and proud to come alongside my partner, Kelly. She's great. 2026 this year marks 35 years in industry for me. Roles in operations, sales leadership, and really the focus lately has been on entrepreneurship, finance, and mergers and acquisitions. So I'm constantly asking myself, why would somebody invest a half an hour of their time in conversation with us, listening to us talk? And quite simply, we, as well as the authors that join us, we've learned from both our experiences as well as our mistakes, really kind of what works and then what it takes to be successful, however you personally define success. So I believe that by following that proven track record of success, that our listeners can kind of accelerate their career paths and reach the director level, the VP level, or even the C-suite level quicker. And we'll learn more about that from Dr. Ply, because in our conversation, you mentioned that 75% of the people that have attended your seminars have actually been promoted at least once. And I believe you made the comment about several that have even been promoted to the SVP level. So that's exciting. So I've shared on a couple of different occasions that I didn't hold a VP title until I was 48, so relatively advanced in my career, and that I didn't complete my MBA and my graduate work until I was 52. So those are kind of personal badges of honor, if you will. And I certainly couldn't have given up long before that, but I stuck the course, if you want to think of it that way. Kind of a testament to grit and determination. So all that said, no two journeys are the same. And my hopes that we're able to accelerate the professional progression of our listeners, providing tools and resources which prepare them for the next opportunity. I often say that the time to prepare is now, and it's too late once the opportunity is imminent. So we're essentially preparing ourselves for the opportunities which we're not even aware, and are essentially investing in ourselves by doing so. I know Kelly's going to add to that. I kind of asked her about that, but I believe that resonates with Kelly's ongoing commitment to education and what she does at Rockhurst.
Yeah, right on. And that's where Brett and I met. I was one of his professors during his MBA pursuit. So then invited him to come and speak, and he brought in 100-something books. So we bonded over books for several years ago. But yeah, the growth, you have to be a lifelong learner. And Janet, you start the book talking about that with the world is different now. And leaders are under so much pressure, and things are different and changing, and you have to change with it. So as much as we focus on our viewers and the listeners, we also enjoy learning too. So it's I pick books for the year that I want to read. Actually, that was why I picked this one. This one came out last October 21st of 2025, and it's called Practical Leadership, a guide to building trust, getting results, and changing lives. And that's what leaders need right now, is practical and a guide. And so I thought that was such a gift, a great timely resource for people. And let's see, what else I was going to say. Oh, yeah. So another thought I had about why was I keep hearing from people from my clients, that they are in roles that they weren't really prepared for. And somebody left and they were the interim and then they got the full-time, or they're adding on more responsibilities because of mergers, acquisitions, or other changes. And so these are sharp, smart people, many with advanced degrees and a lot of experience, but they didn't get all of the nuances that are in this book. So is that what you saw? You kind of talk about it a little bit in the book, but is that what you saw happening and why you wanted to actually put it in writing and share it with the world?
Yes. So from the perspective of recovering these large scale programs, I had a front seat a lot of times directly to the CEO and boards of directors who, I mean, these were, $600 million, $800 million programs in some cases, not all of them were that big. But what I noticed was it didn't matter if someone was a first-time leader all the way up to the C-suite. It seemed like they still struggled with some of these basic things. I've had COOs and CEOs say, I don't know how to have a one-on-one or what I should be talking about, or I've had a CEO who said, I just really can't have bad conversations, difficult conversations. I had another C-suite executive who said, I can't fire this person and I would like you to do it for me. I'm like, I'm a consultant. You want a consultant to fire your person? It's like, I can do it, but HR has to be in the room. So it doesn't matter if you're the first time leader all the way up to the C-suite. What I have found is that most high achievers get promoted because they were high achievers and expected to figure out this little leadership thing along the way. So if you think about it, if we've all been winging it all the way up to the C-suite, it's not surprising that you can reach these high levels in an organization and still miss some of the very basic fundamental things of what it takes to be a really good leader.
And if you didn't have great role models,
we haven't talked about that a lot in this call, but companies are shelving and they're sunsetting any of their training, any of their development programs. And the thing that jumped out at me in the book, I love it. You mentioned the RACI diagram, and I can remember sitting in an executive meeting the very first time I saw that technique, that tool, whatever term you like to use, and I was mid-40s. Dr. Ply, something like that. And the young gentleman that was presenting this he had to be no more than 30. And I thought, here's this, and he was a very, very bright young man. And he's, what differentiated him from me at that point? I was higher on the org chart, had the better title, the better comp package, all those things, but he had more education. He had more experience. He'd been exposed to advanced learning. And you kind of touched on that. I mean, this book is an opportunity to kind of close the gap between those that maybe don't have a graduate degree, but are overachievers, and those that do have a graduate degree. So oftentimes our performance and what we demonstrate either with a client or internally within our peer set is much about education and awareness and exposure of anything. And I think the book does a wonderful job of exposing the reader to a broad spectrum of these different tools and techniques, which really are table stakes in many of the business degrees.
I thought the same. And what came to my mind was the book does a great job of filling in the nuances, filling in the blanks for conscious incompetence. So like the leader, Janet, said that doesn't like to have hard conversations, or won't fire someone, or the ones, maybe a lot of one-on-ones get canceled all the time because they don't know how to have a one-on-one. So they know they can't do stuff. So they have conscious incompetence, but it also brings out some things that they can fine tune because they have unconscious incompetence and they just don't know. So the way the book answers a lot of the situations helps fill in that too, even for leaders who don't know that there's an issue there.
Yeah, and what I have found from coaching people and being in these situations is that they genuinely want to do the right thing, but they just don't know how.
Right.
And so if you look at a lot of the leadership books that are out there, they will, let's just take difficult conversations, because I think that's something everybody struggles with, or at least it's hard for us, right? So most of the books will say something along the lines of, great leaders have the difficult conversations, and they do it in a timely manner, and they do it in a way to, not damage a relationship. Well, most people know they need to have the difficult conversation. They need to know how. How do I approach it? And the book, I've included a framework there so that it's like, let me walk you through it, and let me give you some examples of how you would use this framework. And what I find from the readers and the people that I've either worked with on coaching or training is they print out this framework. Some of them have it laminated, and they're like, this was exactly what I needed.
Wow.
And I'm much more the how-to person, and I know what I struggled with, right? So it's like, don't tell me what I already know I need to do. Tell me how I need to do it. Show me how I need to do it. And that was what I tried to build into the book, so that it didn't matter if you were a new leader or an executive, you could read it and go, there's something for me to take away from here.
Yeah, I thought that too, for that. Even if it's, those steps to take for some of them, but there's going to be the wording that's different. Or you had some frameworks that were just nuanced. I keep saying that, but nuanced that I think anyone who reads this is going to see, oh, I could do that better. Maybe they're not.
The meeting best practices really jumped out for me, and I always try to pull something out of the book. And whether I'm reading the content for the benefit of our conversations later in the month, or whether I'm, to Kelly's point, I'm reading the book because I want to read it. Right? I've got blind spots that I can correct, and even for a person who's been in a leadership role as long as I have, there's always opportunities to go back and refresh and reset. And I make the comment all the time that if you get a football coach that takes over a struggling team, what's the first thing they say in their very first press conference, right? We're going back to basics, right? We're going back to the fundamentals. And this book, those two terms, fundamentals and the basics, that's kind of what resonated with me. And we can all benefit from doing that and just doing a reset and saying, you know what? Hey, we used to have great meetings, and our meetings probably have gotten stale, and we need to reset, and let's get back to the basics and back to fundamentals.
And I think you did a good job of it says building trust, getting results, and changing. You brought the humanity into these processes, like meetings. I've read lots of books and articles, and I have a framework that I use for meetings and have shared. But it's important that you talk about, ask them in the one-on-ones, like ask them how they're feeling, and you have a whole list of questions. I don't know. I don't think it says how you're feeling, but there's a list of specific questions to help gauge that. So you work on the relationship throughout, and on the framework for the bigger meetings about building trust. So it's more than just issue the agenda 2 days in advance and here's what it should include. It's the humanity aspect too. That's what makes a difference for leaders now, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you could tell from reading the book early on that was not the leader that I was in the beginning. Yeah. I was much more of the get it done task, didn't get close to anybody. What if I have to fire them? I was very much, let's get results. And that worked very well up through my career up to a certain point, because, what leader doesn't like to have, their folks getting results.
Right.
But what I realized throughout a series of events and, my own personal life and all, is how important the human aspect actually is, and how much more you can get done if you take that human aspect into consideration. So that was a pretty big wake-up call for me. And I also talk about a 360 in the book that that drove that home a little bit more. Was Janet is my way or the highway, or comments like that. And I'm like, ouch, I pouted for a while, and then realized that I needed to learn from that and develop a much more humanistic approach to leadership. And then I was amazed at just how much more you can get done when you bring a whole team along and everybody's working together, and they don't, they're not afraid of you chastising them or putting them down in front of other people or bringing you ideas and all. So that was a lesson that I had to learn from the beginning, because people mimic the leader, and most of the leaders that I worked for early in my career were more like command and control. And so that was something kind of like what I was just talking about, where we all just sort of wing it on our way up. And I winged the wrong thing.
And that's who you had modeling. So the book did bring back some memories for me too. Oh, I certainly learned this along the way as well. One of my early mentors, I remember him telling me, sitting me down after a review or something, and he said, you know, Susie over there, she doesn't want to be the president of this agent of this company. And I was like, what? She was 56. I was 23. She's 56 years old. And he's saying, no, this is her after career. Like, she just wants to work somewhere fun and go home at 5. And I was like, oh, wow, really? She doesn't want to be. I'm thinking everybody wants to be the top. And so it was really a good conversation. But that was just one memory. But yeah, I found throughout this whole thing, it brought back memories of, yeah, I remember when I learned that hard lesson too. So one of the benefits of the book is people can read this and follow these steps, and it's repeatable, and they don't have to make the same mistakes that we made. They'll make other ones.
So I read chapter 6, believe it or not, Dr. Bly, 3 times. And chapter 6 is all about emotional intelligence. And
yeah.
I read it the first time, and I really, it stuck with me. And I've been focused lately on self-awareness and emotional intelligence. And ironically, our book next month is Travis Bradberry's Emotional Intelligence. So those two things kind of tie together. And Kelly does a great job of picking our books, and she gets all the credit, and there's usually a theme there, but the emotional intelligence piece stuck. And in that section, you and I think this applies to you, you said, where you had a government contractor that you found to be very difficult to work with, and you went in and you established trust, and then obviously you talked a lot about transparency. So I do a considerable amount of cold calling in my business, and I always find it interesting. I get somebody on the phone that's responsible for supply chain for 100 restaurants or 200 restaurants, even some that are up to 1,000 restaurants. And wow. I ask myself, what's the likelihood that this individual is going to turn over, any item in their order guide to me based on the first phone call? And you all know it's 0, right? That's not going to happen. So as I reframed my entire approach, I had to start with the idea of establishing trust and rapport. And that just stuck with me when you started giving that use case of that difficult government contractor. But what I found to be really interesting, and this kind of ties into your theme of trust and transparency, is I've developed 2 techniques. The first is I'll make a comment to that decision maker of, hey, I'm not really doing this for the money anymore. I'm doing it because I enjoy the relationships. I want to bring value. I love solving problems, and I'm super, super competitive. And then the last thing I tell people is I say, I'm the most honest person you'll ever meet. I'll never tell you a lie. And you can always expect that whatever I'm telling you is the truth, even to the point where it may cost me money. And what I found very fascinating is those 2 statements basically bring the energy in the room down to a very manageable level and almost disarm and take the tension out of the conversation. And when I read that that use case you had of that government contractor who was difficult to deal with and how you handled it, it really stuck with me, and it kind of resonates with what I'm doing in my own work as well.
Yeah, and I think what the point that you just made about saying, I'm always going to be honest with you, that was probably a really big turning point in the relationship with that contracting officer. Because I just said, I am an honest person. I said, you will be the second person to know if there's a problem on this contract, because I will be the first, but you will be the second. And you have my word on that. And after that, the relationship was very different. It was actually one agency or one department, one agency within a department. And we wound up opening the contract up to the entire department, and was able to get a lot more business and bump out some other contractors who were in there, because that contracting officer just trusted the work that we did.
Well, you said a key word there, and Kelly and I have resonated on that keyword trust. And it's just amazing. All the books we read, all the authors we talk about, all the concepts, how common that word trust is. I can't make the statement with any confidence, but I would venture to say that literally of the 55 books we've read, every book at some point talks about trust. And as a young leader, I don't know that I put enough emphasis and value just simply on trust, professional as well as personal relationships. I even use it with my kids. I've got 2 daughters that are 25 and 27, and I tell them, I can handle bad news. I don't like surprises, but if we lose trust, we really don't have much. And boy, I tell you what, that is just very, very important. And for everybody that's listening, really do a self-awareness, a personal assessment, and trust. It is just such an important component of a relationship.
And there are self-assessments in the book. people.
Well, it's funny. I was interested again in emotional awareness and saying, how do we measure that? So I threw in a chat prompt and I actually wrote it down. I'm not familiar with this, but I'm going to look into it. It's the MSCEIT, the Mayr-Solovey-Caruso Emotional Intelligence Test, and will actually give you a self-awareness emotional intelligence quotient. So I'll probably take it between now and next month, and given we're having a conversation with Travis next month, I'll let you know how we score. But I'm fascinated with this idea of self-awareness and emotional quotient. I think it's really table stakes today, and it's something we can all do better on.
Yeah, for sure.
And you'll have an assessment in Bradbury's book on the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 that you're doing. You can take
No,
that
the new.
assessment.
It's not 2.0. It's the new one.
Oh, it's the new one. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to get that one too.
Yeah. I have 2.0 right here.
Yeah.
From 2009, I think it came out. But the point about the self-awareness is, like we've said a few times, the leaders we work with are great leaders. They're great people. They're not trying to be jerks or hard on people. They're great people, but they have pressure. And under pressure, something changes, then there's something different expectations. Under pressure, then they go back to the bad habits that they came up with. And you revert to whatever is the fastest or the easiest, the least contentious. And so then that's not always the best way to interact with people to keep the trust. So that's where things can fall apart.
Yeah.
So you spend a lot of time talking about 360-degree performance reviews, which I'm a big fan of well-executed performance management programs. Can you speak a little bit to how common or not the idea of the 360 performance reviews are? And then we've all been exposed to performance management systems that are poorly executed, poorly done. They're just one of those things where management's checking a box because leadership has asked them to, versus truly investing in the individual and investing in the review. But I can tell by the volume of the book that you dedicated to that, you're definitely a fan, as well as am I. So I'm curious to get more of an impact or feedback from you on that particular topic.
Yeah, I think 360s are a great tool. But to your point, Brett, you want to make sure that those 360s are very well executed, not just a checkbox, from an OD department or something like that, or an exercise. So whenever I do 360s in organizations, I have a process that we follow, and I have the senior executive of that department or even the company to go through and say, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, and so that it's make it very clear that this is not something that's punitive. This is something that we need to do in order for all of us to get better. And we even go so far, like in one company, we probably had 100 people who were going to participate as a reviewer for an executive team in one way, shape, either as a direct report, a peer, a stakeholder, a manager, 2 managers up. And we convened like 3 different sessions so everybody could attend to say, here's why we're doing this. We know it may be a little uncomfortable for you if you say something negative, especially about your boss or whatever, but we really, really value your input, and we want you to give us, the truth here, because nobody can fix what they don't know about, and nobody knows if they have a blind spot. That's why we call it a blind spot, right? And so I have found that when you invest that time up front to really get everybody on the same page as to why we're doing this and the benefits that we hope to get, that it's much better. In that same company that I just gave the example, I had several other department heads came to me and said, I'd like to have you do 360s on my departments as well. So we wound up doing quite a few in that organization, even though we just started out at the top on there. But I think, to your point, if you just do it and say, hey, you get an email comes across that said, you've been selected to go and do this, you're not going to get very, very good results.
So 2 things that you said that I think are worth repeating. If you do the 360-degree review, you go down that path. By definition, who's ever being reviewed has to be open to change. What do you find in terms of that individual being receptive to the idea that, to your point, and I love your word blind spot, to correcting that, developing in themselves, investing, taking on whatever's needed for training. But how receptive do you often find those people are to maybe negative or constructive criticism?
What I have found is that the people who are like the lifelong learners, they really are trying to be the best leaders, super open, very open. And what can I do differently? How can I be better? When you run across some of the leaders who may be a little bit more on the arrogant side or think they're doing a great job, they are usually very surprised by the results.
Right.
And you can tell because when they do a self-evaluation, they'll give themselves like 5s on almost everything. Maybe they'll give themselves a 4.5 on, something. And then they're, the teams or stakeholders, whatever, comes back and scores them on 2s and 3s and 1s, and they literally are in a state of shock. It's almost like, how could you not be aware of this? This is a giant, a giant blind spot there. But that's just what I have found is the folks who think they do a good job and maybe don't invest as much from a leadership development standpoint are the ones who are the most surprised when the results aren't what they were expecting.
Now, it's very insightful, very well said. You made another comment a minute ago about the why, and I found this very interesting. I had an example here recently where a direct report had just gotten the results from a strategy that we'd implemented, and it was the same thing that I've been asking for, at least I thought I had, for probably 12 months, maybe even 18 months. And I went to the individual and I said, coach me. And I use that for people above and below me and even horizontally in the org chart, coach me. I said, coach me, how are we getting results and why are we getting results now when this is the same thing that I've been asking for the last 12 or 18 months? And the individual looked back at me and he said, I don't know that I ever understood the why. And you made the comment a minute ago that you explained the why. And I think as leaders, particularly ones that maybe got a blind spot as it relates to self-awareness, we're good at articulating the what. We're probably good at articulating the how. And I think for me personally, maybe for others, there's a blind spot that we never take the time to explain the why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right on that. We assume, leaders assume that the why is obvious to everyone, and the why can be different for people. So some people care about the bottom line of the financials. Other people might care more about how the why helps people in the community. So even if it's a tax preparation company, that some people want to know about their bonus, but other people care that they're helping small businesses stay in business because they're good at their taxes. So there's ways to connect in different ways with people, but leaders assume that everybody is on the same page, especially in tough times.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Dr. Ply, very envious of you to have had exposure to all these great companies and then obviously be able to leave your mark and make an impression on them. I'm curious, when you go into an initial client engagement and you're doing your initial assessment, are there tells that you've grown accustomed to and you're familiar with where you say, hey, I think this one's going to be great and I think I'm going to be able to make an impact, and then other tells where you run into a client group or a customer, a client, and you say, you know what, this one's really going to be tough and I got my work cut out for me. I'm curious that first 48 hours with a leadership group, I'm sure there's things that you've seen before time and again that give you a good indication of probably how this is going to end or the direction that it's going to go. I find that fascinating.
Let me give you two different scenarios. One from the perspective of recovering large-scale programs. So one of the first questions that I ask a CEO or their direct reports is, if we recover this program, and we probably will have to extend the schedule and get more money, but if we replan this program and we are successful on hitting the revised budget and schedule, but 4 people got divorces, we had to take 3 people to the emergency room, and we had higher than industry turnover rate, would you call it a success or not? Mm-hmm. And if they hesitate, I know it's going to be a hard program. And we just have to have a hard conversation at that point to say, if you want me to do this, work with you guys, I'm not going to mistreat the people. It's usually because, and I usually tell them this, it's because of some of the bad mistakes that you guys have made here in the C-suite that we help people burning themselves out, missing their families, get-togethers. They're traveling, every week to be here to try and fix things. So I'm not going to just continue on with that same type of mindset, So just know that's how I work. We can get it back on the rails. That's not how I work. So I think that's one thing on the program recovery. When I go into a company for this, the type of leadership development work and all, I know, like, especially if someone says, I want you to coach this person, you're their last ditch effort to remaining employed. That's not the kind of client that I'm looking for. So when I have an initial engagement, part of the intake process for me is I have non-negotiables around being a partner, the honesty and trust that you talked about, and don't set a person up to fail, and don't set me up to fail. We're all here working on this together. So I just have those conversations up front, initially. And it's like, if you've only brought me in here to help you with your most troubled people, and you don't want to, like, raise your whole organizational leadership capability, you should probably go find somebody else.
Right.
Brett, you do some consulting. What are some signs you look or you notice?
It's interesting. When I spend time initially assessing the team to try to determine what they need and what they don't need. And I was curious as I was listening to Dr. 𝙭, because I'll have clients that I go in and I'll say at the end of our initial assessment, I don't think I'm a fit. And it always interests me. Hey, they're prepared to pay me. They're prepared to do what I need to generate revenue and cash flow for my business. But I'm pretty transparent. And in my season in my career, I don't need all the money. I don't need all the deals. I don't need all the clients. I need clients where I can make an impact. And I think clients are always intrigued when I tell them, hey, you're doing things as well or better than I can probably do for you. And introducing me into your supply chain solution more than likely would just slow you down and complicate your process. Where they get value from that is it's third-party validation, telling them that they're doing things right. And then I've got other folks that obviously to Dr. 𝙭's point, they've got blind spots, they've got opportunities. They're probably running with too thin of a bench. And as basically marketing and operations and senior leadership comes to them for any different reasons to make changes in their supply chain, they're really left with no alternatives but to lean on a third party like myself. So you really didn't go there, but I'm expecting that you engage with clients, not frequently, but periodically, that you just say, hey, I'm not a good fit. I don't think this is going to work. And I do the same, not necessarily in a negative way. Most of the time it's a positive validation of what they're doing is they've already got what I consider to be a top tier or A-class system.
Yeah. And if I can refer somebody to them that may be better, maybe as someone who I need you to help coach people who are in transition. That's not one of my strong points. So that would be something that I would say, hey, well, I have other coaches in my network who would be better at this than I am.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. I think that that's, again, honesty about helping.
Kelly and I talk, not every conversation, but probably every other one, about the value of networking. I love that you hit on that. I know I have a network, but I call it deep and wide. And inevitably, I have opportunities that come my way that I'm not able to solve with my skill set. But I have a list of what I call connectors that I'm able to lean on and bring into deals. And then we do what I call a fractional deal, where I've got somebody that I brought in to support either the buy side or the sell side. So high five to you for mentioning that network and staying connected, and then being open to offering referrals, because inevitably those referrals, I would almost guarantee, and I'm going to laugh here in a second, but I would guarantee the people that you refer often refer you right back.
I think that's critical. I've tried to really spend a lot of time building a Rolodex of high quality consultants and experts, so that even if someone is just in a conversation telling me about a problem they have, I can say, oh, well, if you're interested in solving that problem, I'd be happy to connect you with Kelly or Brett or someone this is their specialty.
Yeah, exactly. I did a little research as we were preparing for the call on your background, and in your bio, it mentions that you'd work with Tyson, and Tyson is a company that I'm very, very familiar with. So I thought that was interesting that we had that connection.
Yep, they're up here in Northwest Arkansas.
That's right. That's right.
Ah, interesting. Janet, what just occurred to me too was thinking about how you've taken this book to another level. So you refer to doing training. So you do training and the book is based on training that you had been doing. So the training you still have. And then, but just talk for a quick minute about 𝗕𝙑𝙑𝙑, because I think that's so useful for people.
Oh, well, I certainly feel that way. So, as I mentioned, I came up through the trenches on this. And even when I was doing this practical leadership workshop that I started back in 2019, it was always a very hands-on workshop. We don't have case studies. We don't make up anything. It's like, when you come to this workshop, we're going to work on what you need to work on. You need to have a difficult conversation. We're going to work through that. You need to have one-on-ones. We'll work through that. You need a strategic plan. We'll work through it. So it's very project-based learning on something they're doing. So there's no dot connecting. It's hands-on, because I find that is how adult learners remember more.
Mm-hmm.
So what I realized, though, just like everybody else, is that even though you do all this project-based learning, Tuesday morning rolls around, it's hair on fire time again, and they just go right back to the old way of doing things. And so, to your point, Kelly, with 𝗕𝙑𝙑𝙑𝙑, I've taken the Practical Leadership book and the Practical Leadership workshop, and I have created a series of AI thinking partners. So now, when I was teaching the framework for difficult conversations in the workshop, which I still do, by the way, it's already built in to this set of AI instructions that I give people, so that it can be their thinking partner and help them prepare for this conversation in advance using the framework in the book. So they now have, they're able to sit down, explain the situation to their AI tool of choice. If the tool doesn't think it has enough information, it may ask a little bit more. And this is where things like, if you really want to get into dialing things in, you could put in like a DISC profile or your Myers-Briggs, results or whatever there. And it will lead you through this framework to say, here is how to best deal, with this person, script it out, how to start it. And then I've taken it a couple of steps further, which is, now help me role play it. So you can either role play as the leader, or as you can have AI be the leader role play, or it can be the employee, and you can pick like, what type of reaction do I expect this person to have? Will they be defensive? Will they be receptive? Will they shut down? And so you can go through and simulate this whole scenario, or multiple scenarios, if you will. Same thing for one-on-one. I mean, basically every concept in the book has a set of AI-guided instructions with a lot of the book built in, and the frameworks and all. Like strategic planning is all built around the semantics that I have in the book and the process that I follow and things like that. So now you don't have to go back and remember what did I learn in that workshop and go try and find your workbook that's out on the shelf. You just go, I have to have a difficult conversation. I need to do strategic planning. I know there's an AI thinking partner for that. And so now all I have to do is run that. And so that, we're not trying to replace leaders. We're not trying to replace their judgment, but think how important it is, how valuable it is, if you have a very tenured thinking partner, even if it's AI, to now walk you through a process that experienced leaders would follow. And so, I continue to build that out on, and more and more things. How can I help my teams be more creative and innovative? How can I build trust with my team? And lots of times it's actually putting several pieces together to get to that end result. If you have a situation, for example, where, let's say your boss comes to you and says, I need you to hold your people more accountable. Well, most people would just go, put in a prompt or something that says, I need to hold my people more accountable. But whenever you, run it through like these guided instructions through, from a practical leadership standpoint, it's now going to ask you questions about, have you set clear expectations for this person? Are they written down? Would this person agree with you that they actually know what's being said? So it's going to ask you a whole series of questions to say, is a lack of accountability the real problem or not? If you were in strategic planning and you say, help me write a SMART goal for I want to develop this or deliver this software package by the end of the year. If you just put that into an AI tool, it will say, oh, what a great idea, and spit out a SMART goal. You put it into my tool and it says, that's a project, it's not a goal. Let's see if we can figure out the goal. Why are you doing the project? And so it puts the guardrails around and really brings in, like, I've curated, like you mentioned earlier, we have lots and lots of books that you guys have done or referenced in my book. So this is like, I've tried to curate the best of the best to build into that. So it's not just what I think, it's what people a whole lot smarter than me think, but build that into not only the book, but also into these AI thinking partners, so that regardless of what level leader you are, you now have a process and a tool you can use to say, here's how an experienced leader would handle this situation.
And I'm so fascinated by it because it's not just generic or the top 20 books on strategic planning or whatever. It's you were discerning in what you would put. So it's like having your experience and judgment to guide somebody through all of it. So I think that's fantastic. I think you're onto something. And I love that you're doing it to help people take the book to really use it and go deeper and make it a reliable tool for them. So I'm excited to see where you go with that.
So is that behind a firewall or a subscription, or where do we access that, Dr. Ply?
Well, today I run it on a learning management system, and you just actually go copy the prompt and run it in whatever AI tool that you want to use it in. So it's AI tool agnostic. You can run it in Copilot, Gemini, Claude, whatever you want.
And it's an annual fee, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Figuring it all out still, but I'm excited to hear where it goes. And
well, I mean, it sounds like literally having a 24-hour, a coach on call, almost like.
Yeah.
Where I was going with that is you started to think about, and you've mentioned it a couple of times, having a difficult conversation. Well, if you're a leader and you have to have this conversation and you put absolutely no preparation or no thought into that, more than likely that conversation is not going to start well, it's not going to go well, and it's not going to end well. But just simply by being proactive about preparing for that conversation and utilizing all the tools, i.e. your prompts and your AI chat, that the likelihood that you have a successful engagement, good or bad, probably goes up by several folds, I would think.
Yeah, I've had so many people say, especially on the difficult conversation, even whenever it was just a framework and not in a tool, who said that was a game changer for them. But now I get feedback all the time on, here's a situation I had. I was able to prepare for it, diffuse it. I was fully expecting it to blow up like it's done every other time, and we walked away based on using this. With a professional relationship. And I've had similar feedback, like on executive prompts, for example. A lot of new people, especially, or if you're technical, you want to throw in a bunch of features that executives couldn't care about or don't care about. And so I've had a number of people, gone through the workshops and use the tool and say, you're not going to believe this. I just gave a presentation to C-suite, and they said this was the best presentation they'd ever seen. So like on that particular set of instructions, it guides you through to make sure you have everything you need. That you pick your audience. Am I talking to a CIO, a board? Who am I talking to? And it guides you through what these folks are going to be interested in. Limits you to like 5 slides plus an appendix, and then it also gives you, here are questions that you may anticipate, and here might be some suggested answers, but think through that.
You just read my mind. I was thinking about being prepared for that conversation, and then obviously the response, or whoever you're talking to, they get a chance to give their opinion or reply. I become a big advocate of these, the open-ended questions, starting with how and what, and then also the technique of 5 whys. I don't believe that was mentioned in the book, but I'm curious to get your opinion on how effective those are and if you use those frequently.
Yeah, 5 whys is actually built in. I mean, if you're I think it's even in the book too, as well, on the cause and effect, the root cause section on tools. So I also have a set of AI instructions to help a person walk through and diagnose a problem. And the 5 whys is one of the techniques that's built in to the instructions to help you actually get to the root cause of that.
So good.
Well, hey, we couldn't be more happier to have you with us. I think Kelly and I could probably talk to you for hours. So I know this was just released in 2025. Is there another book on the horizon, or is this the end, or have that you even made that decision?
Never say never, right? I mean, this was my second book. I've written another one before. I think this book is it's a lot. It was a hard book to write. It took me 3 years because it's so broad. If you notice, most books are very topic specific. So if I were to continue writing, which I may do, you never know, I think I would probably try and put it into more bite-sized pieces and introduce the AI component, so that if someone says, I need to know how to build trust, just go grab this, or if I need to go learn how to be more strategic, go grab this. And so I probably would do something like that. I have toyed with that.
Yeah, Kelly and I talked about that last month. As much of what we talk about and cover falls under that umbrella of soft skills. And I even challenge myself, and I know Kelly's doing the same, is to say, okay, soft skills are great, and we all need to continue to sharpen the edge on those. But what are the hard skills, whether it's accounting, whether it's finance, whether it's real estate, AI, anything? And I know you've mentioned several times AI, so I can tell that you're a fan of that. But to the point of our listeners of just saying, hey, you really have to be dual disciplined or have multiple streams of information and knowledge and teaching, soft skills being under the practical leadership, but all these other hard skills as well.
Yeah.
What's your, Brett, we always ask at the end, would you recommend this book, and who would you recommend it to?
Yeah, great question. And yes, I would. And typically, you remember our responses, Kelly, we're always saying, well, I would recommend it for this group, right?
Yeah.
Junior leaders, early stage managers. And I always think of the barbell, right? We've got that college graduate who's maybe in the consulting world versus a CEO C-suite level. And this one, I think, appeals and has application for both ends of the barbell, right? I mean, obviously, we mentioned the RACI document and several of the techniques and tools that are in the book. And that's the key word. There are tools and techniques, and I think Dr. Ply even mentioned it. There's a lot of practical things, practical applications, things that you can immediately apply. And unless you've taken a graduate school course, you more than likely aren't familiar with many of the things that are in the book. So there's a ton of application there. And then you take and go to the other end of the spectrum, that C-suite executive who probably has an MBA, maybe even has a PhD, has multiple leadership roles. And again, what I referenced earlier in our conversation, going back to the fundamentals, going back to basics. And I think that's where the book applies to that continuum spectrum of leaders.
Yeah, that's where I came out on it too. I thought I didn't know if we'd agree or not, but yeah, that's where I came out. Sometimes we don't agree and say the same thing.
We don't.
But this time I thought the same, because I tend to lean toward the mid-career for our talk conversations, but the newer professionals, they want to learn faster. And then the experienced ones need a refresh, and they would benefit from some self-awareness with fine-tuning a lot of what they do by reading this. So I agree with you on that. Jana, what's one last message you would like to share with our viewers? One last thing we didn't talk about, or that you want to make sure the point hits home, and we'll wrap it up.
Well, I think the core message of the book is probably the thing I'd want people to be left with, which is, leadership is not an art or a mystery to be solved. It's tactical. It's a skill that can be learned. So when people feel like, oh, Kelly, Brett, y'all are just natural leaders, it's like most natural leaders, didn't get there without a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and learning and trial and error and all of that stuff. So I would just want to say to people, yeah, we all have our superpowers and our strengths and weaknesses, but leadership is a skill and it can be learned. And that was the whole premise of my book was, don't worry about leadership as something that you had to be born with. It's something that anybody can learn if they put in the time.
Yeah,
and Kelly, we're going to have to capture that and put that on the website.
Yeah, right on.
There's an air bubble there with quotes and dot. And then at the end, we're going to say, Dr. Ply, August 2026. That was fantastic.
That was. Yeah. My thought was going to be simplify. I think we can make leadership way too complicated, and be a person. Bring the humanity, look out for that. But don't make it more complicated than it needs to be, and learn from other people so you don't have to make the same mistakes that some of us have made. Thank you so much, Janet. Thank you for writing this and for sharing your thoughts, your ideas with us today. We really appreciate it. Brett and I appreciate it. I know people who watch will as well. So thank you so much for it.
So
Yeah.
around a week later next month with September Conversation. Normally we meet on Thursdays. We'll be on Wednesday the 30th. So moving from Thursday to Wednesday, we've got some travel and some conflicts there. So if you don't catch us live, you can surely catch us on the LinkedIn podcast, or you can catch us on YouTube. So we're staying with the theme next month of emotional intelligence, EQ, covering Travis Bradberry's The New Emotional Intelligence, and look forward to sharing that with everyone. So Kelly kind of mentioned it earlier, and we tagged this very, very early in this journey, but our inspiration of why we do this is to inspire the leaders of tomorrow to invest in themselves today. So we always kind of go out with this idea of continue reading, continue investing, particularly investing in yourself. It's the best investment that you'll ever make.
Yeah, right on. So we look forward to talking with you next month about emotional intelligence, Travis Bradberry's new one, and keeping that conversation going. So thank you both. And thank you for watching, and leave comments or feel free to ask us questions if you have anything. And we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks, everyone.